Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Righteous Ruckus podcast. I'm your host, Riley Lowe, and today I want to talk about an event, a major event in my life that happened back in 2012. Remember the year that the Aztec calendar said the world was supposed to end? Everybody freaked out about that. So this happened during that time, and I want to go through that and it's maybe a two-part deal, but I want to go through that and talk about what happened and then the after effects of that. So without further ado, let's get into it.
It's time to get off the church benches and into the trenches. Let's make a righteous ruckus.
Okay, so before we get into it, remember to like, follow, subscribe, share, whatever it is that you can do to help further this podcast and get it to more people. I would greatly appreciate that. And don't forget, you can let me know you're praying or support financially on givesendgo.com/support righteous ruckus. Or you can also send me an email at righteousruckuspodcast@gmail.com. All right, so leading up to this event, I was a Christian. Praise the Lord, I was a Christian when this happened. I do not know how I would have made it through this event without being a Christian. People do. I do not know how they do that. It was so difficult. So by the grace of God, I was a Christian. I gave my life to Christ. Not a whole lot before this, but a number of years before this happened. And there's plenty of things that I did before I was a Christian that could have put me in a different situation. Let's just say it that way. In this scenario, so it was a dark and stormy night on September 13th of 2012. I know it would be more ominous if that was a Friday the 13th, but it was actually a Thursday the 13th. But in any event, me and my wife, I had taken her to over to Enid, Oklahoma. She was getting a master's degree. I'd taken her to her college class there, and we had actually gone out to supper that evening with my dad because he was actually preparing to go through chemo treatments. The next morning, his cancer had come back, and he was getting ready to start treatments again, and he was going to stay the night at my aunt's house. So we got up to supper with him, and then I took my wife, dropped her off at class, and then I went and kind of piddled around, went to some stores or whatever, and kind of wasted some time until it was time to come back. On the way back, I picked up some chocolate malts, was planning on enjoying that, surprising her with one, and I got a little bit ways down the road. I was just a few miles away from the college, and I was in, which at the time was a 6-day-old Ford Escape. Here's a picture of it. But this is before, and then I went through, and I was in my far right-hand lane, right, and this is a 4-lane road, and another guy was coming in his far right-hand lane. He came across all lanes of traffic and hit me head on. The police estimate that I was doing about 25, 30 miles an hour, somewhere around there. And this guy was doing about 55 to 60, far exceeding the speed limit of being in town in Enid, Oklahoma. And there was actually one of those ice vending machines, and it had security cameras, closed circuit security cameras on each side of it. So I actually have video footage of me coming from one direction and then going on the other direction, and then the impact, right? This is the impact of drunk driving. Yeah, this guy was drunk, okay? So like I said before, if this would have happened to me years prior, I could have been the one drunk hitting somebody. It could have easily been me. I have been intoxicated behind the wheel before. I'm not proud to say it. I'm actually quite embarrassed and ashamed to say it, but that was a life before Christ, if you will. So anyway, this guy come across, he was in a full-size Dodge pickup. I was in a little Ford Escape. He had all the speed, he had all the mass, he had all the energy. He hit me head on. Here is a video of the actual wreck, and It's like I said, it's misty and rainy and whatnot out. So take that into consideration. What you'll notice during this video, if I didn't have this video, people would not believe this. How often have you come across a wreck or somebody need help and you call 911? How long does it take people to respond? Okay? And think about that when you watch this. This is not, it's cut from one side to the next, but once you see me and you see that wreck, see how long it takes for help to show up, the help that I desperately needed. So here's the video. So did you notice in that video, from the moment of impact till when people showed up on the scene to help me was 57 seconds. Seconds. Right? Less than a minute. And the people that I needed were there. They got me. Here's an after shot at the junkyard of the car afterwards. All right? So they showed up. They actually were coming back from a false alarm. The ambulance and some firefighter people, they come around the corner and said, this guy needs help. Let's go help him. That's why it only took 57 seconds for somebody show up that I desperately needed. They showed up, right? And they started cutting me out of the vehicle. By cutting, I mean they used the jaws of life thing, right? I was trapped in there essentially. They cut me out of the vehicle. They tell me that I did not lose consciousness, although my memory during that point is very, bits and pieces. I think just due to the trauma and whatever else. So they start cutting me out of the vehicle with the jaws of life. The first thing I remember is the sound of crunching metal of them cutting me out. And I remember saying, what happened? And they said, hold on, buddy, we're going to get you out of there. We're going to get you taken care of. They did. They got me out of there. They got me over to the hospital, right? So where this wreck happened was within a few blocks of a police station, a few blocks of a fire station, and a few blocks of a hospital. Everybody I needed was within a few blocks of where this occurred at. That in itself, was a true blessing. They got me over to the hospital. I was losing a lot of blood. They did their best to get me stabilized, and they called my wife Courtney. They called my dad, right? And they were able to get a hold of them, and they had them come up there to the hospital. They showed up. They said, "Hey, man, this Riley's really messed up. We got to get him out of here. Get him down to Oklahoma City into a place that can really take care of him, down to OU Medical Center in Oklahoma City." So, due to logistics of the helicopter, the ambulance driver said we can get him there faster, and so they were planning to do that. My wife showed up, my dad showed up, like I said, and they actually told my wife and my dad to say goodbye to me before they loaded me up in the ambulance. And they did not mean say goodbye like we'll see you in a little bit in Oklahoma City. They said he will probably not make it. He will probably not make it to Oklahoma City, so you need to say your goodbyes before he gets out of here, or else you probably won't get to say your goodbyes. So with a police officer on one side and my wife and my dad on the other, they held her and took her up there and had her say goodbye to me, and my dad say goodbye to me. It's still really, this is 11 years later, it still makes me emotional talking about that. And my wife recounted to me that she remembers me praying out loud, just saying, God's going to take care of me, God's going to take care of me. I just kept repeating that, kept repeating that God's going to take care of me. So they said their goodbyes, they loaded me up, and they started hauling me to Oklahoma City. I remember a little bit of that ride. What I do remember of that ride is that one of the paramedics, one of the ambulance drivers, it said, hey, hang in there, buddy. You know, we're going to get you down there. We'll get you taken care of. And I remember I just said, what happened? What happened? He said, oh, you're in a bad wreck. We're going to get you taken care of. And I remember saying, God's going to take care of me. And I remember saying, yeah, you're in a bad wreck. You know, yeah, okay. Well, and I said, no, God's going to take care of me. He said, yeah, we're getting you down there. We're trying to patch you up. I said, no, look, God's going to take care of me. I remember him saying, well, perhaps you're right. You know, and that was the first instance of many instances since then that I've actually got to, you know, that's a minor witness to somebody, but I was able to witness to them in that instance. So they got me to Oklahoma City, and they got me stabilized the best they could. They got me put into surgery. So they began repairing all my injuries. They had to evaluate everything, then they got me, you know, repaired all my injuries. So I think it was 3 units of blood during that whole deal. I was bleeding like crazy. Actually, all the doctors said that I should have bled out. They don't know how I did not bleed out in that wreck. Okay, it was by the grace of God. Is really how. And then I remember the paramedics all said, we expected to pull out a dead body from that vehicle. There's no way. We don't come up on a wreck like that and find somebody living. We're just there to recover a body, but you were alive and you hadn't lost consciousness. So they began at OU Medical Center, took me back to surgery, and around 10 hours or so of surgeries is what I've been told. I don't remember any of it because I was in surgery. So they began to repair. Let me try to think about all the injuries so I don't miss them. And I got a laundry list that I try not to miss. So my left femur was shattered in 2 places, compound fracture, sticking out of the skin type deal. They put a titanium rod in there and some sutures around it and removed some dead bone to try to help that heal up the best it could. I had a fractured pelvis. I had my left elbow right here. My radius and ulna were shoved out the back of my elbow, and they repaired that the best they could. Talking to the surgeons later, they said it was kind of like putting together pieces of gravel because I left too much of it out on the road. So they did the best they could putting it back together. They did an excellent job. They said that's where I lost most of my blood, was out of my elbow, because I had sheared a major artery in there. So then I fractured my left humerus as well. I had 4 broken ribs. My right wrist, I had several dislocated bones in there that they had to do pins and screws in there. I had a fractured vertebrae. It wasn't like a major fracture on the vertebrae, but it was a fractured vertebrae. I broke my nose in 2 places here. I broke 4 ribs on my right side. I had multiple sinus fractures from a big gash. You can see they cleaned this up, so it was like kind of like a plastic surgeon that did the repair on this. But they cleaned this up. This was a huge gash in my head. I'm debating on whether to maybe show a blurred picture of that. I probably won't, just to out of abundance of caution. But if you would like me to send you that picture or see that picture, just hit me up about it. But anyway, so I went in surgery. They repaired all that, and then I began recovery. All right, I was in ICU for a few days, and they moved me to the stable part of the ER for a few days. During that time, I had family and friends that had come down and saw me in the hospital, and it's kind of crazy the way they describe it. So because of all my injuries and everything, they had like this vest around me that would every now and then a timer would go off and it would basically shake my chest to keep pneumonia from setting in, is what I've been told. But I was pretty doped up on all this. They had some crazy pain meds they were giving me then. But so when that would happen, they would usher everybody out of the room. So you guys got to leave for a little bit. And from what I've been told, that they could hear me screaming in the hallway because of all the injuries, especially the broken ribs and everything. As that machine was shaking me to prevent pneumonia from setting in, it's causing incredible amounts of pain, and they could hear me screaming down the hallway. So after, I believe it was a total of 7 days between the ICU and the ER, they transported me to a rehabilitation hospital, right? And I know that was, it was exciting, right? It was nervous but exciting. They sent me there because I was good enough to start really working on recovery hardcore. And so I was able to do that. They took me over there, and I remember when we went in the room, and it was a nice place. We went in the room, and I told my wife then, I said, I'm going to walk out of here. I said, I'm going to walk out of this place. Now, spoiler alert, I did not walk out of there, okay? I was pretty jacked up. If you remember before the professional football became powder puff football, they used to have a show. It's called Jacked Up. It was about big hits. They'd be like, he got jacked up.
He got jacked up.
And anyways, so that was a good description of me. I was jacked up at the point, right? 3 out of 4 of my limbs were not usable at the time, and I really couldn't do anything on my own at all. Nothing. And when you're in that situation, modesty goes out the window, right? You can't do anything that is necessary to do as a human being by yourself. Somebody else has to help you with everything. And I mean everything. It's just the way it is. But man, I had some great people there, had family and friends coming and visit. And I spent a total of 28 days there at the rehabilitation hospital. And, really, when I started that recovery process, you got a choice to make, right? You got a choice to make. And thankfully I had my faith in Jesus Christ to lean on there, because I had a choice. I could get bitter or I could get better. There's an awful lot of people choose to get bitter at God, bitter at the situation, and just kind of drown in self-loathing. And I made the choice right on. I was like, I'm going to get better. I'm going to push through this, and we're going to come through it. With the help of Jesus. God's going to take care of me. That was no joke. So through 28 days of working and striving and doing everything that needed to be done, at the end of that 28 days, they said, okay, you're good enough to go home. So I don't know if you've ever been on a long vacation, if you ever have been away from home for a while on work or whatever, then you come home, man, just to come home to your home is a wonderful feeling. And that was very, very wonderful. Now I came home to a hospital bed, and I was still in a wheelchair and all that, but I was home, right? I was home. And so I was home and began that journey. Throughout this process, like I said, I got one limb, my right leg, just had some scratches on it, right? But 3 out of 4 of my limbs, and my head's jacked up, ribs are jacked up. So basically, for the most part, I'm just laying back in a bed, sitting there, or laying there reclined, and can't do a whole lot. But the good thing is that gives you an awful lot of time to do nothing but focus on your relationship with God and focus on what God is doing in this situation, right? Because here's the reality. The miracle giver is so much more and so much better than the miracles that occur. Even if I would have never been healed or never recovered, I would still and do have Jesus. All right? And that's ultimately better than anything that could happen to me in this short life. That's ultimately better than anything. And so that's what I'm talking about. That's where, and see, during this whole process, I had people saying, man, you've got a positive attitude. That's like huge in recovery, right? Is your attitude. I'm keeping a positive attitude. How am I doing that? Through my relationship and my faith in Jesus Christ. That's where that's coming from. That and the people that God put around me to help encourage me constantly. There was so many days where I'd wake up and be like, oh, again, here we go. Where in those moments, God would place people in my life to say encouraging things. It was really an incredible thing. Any day that I seemed to a little bit down, somebody was there to lift me up, and that's just by the grace of God. It really is. And so, in total, I was in a wheelchair for 3 months total. Right. So, like I said, I didn't walk out of there. I was in a wheelchair for 3 months. But then, after those 3 months of working and getting to speak to people, the different healthcare workers that would come and visit and I'd go down to doctor's appointments and those things. And oh man, I'll tell you what though, the whole time, I felt so bad because my wife's got to lug around this wheelchair. She's doing this, she's driving, but she was a total trooper and a complete godsend in that situation. I don't know what I'd do without her, and so we make it through there, and like I said, 3 months, I take my first steps again, right? My mom joked at the time, she said, I've got 3 boys and you're the only one that's learned to walk twice, because it's the truth. I had to learn to walk again. It's a weird feeling when you've got a titanium rod in your leg and your bones are all jacked up and not healed right. So, and you're overcoming all these injuries. So I learned to walk again, and then I was on crutches for a little while, and a walker for a little while, then a cane for a little while, and then eventually was able to go get out of there and not have any assistance. And it was actually it was 8 months to the day of this recovery process before I got to go back to work at my job at the time. Right, it was 8 months of every day you're trying to get better, trying to heal, trying to do this, trying to do that, in order to get to the point where I could be released to go back to work. But through that whole time, man, it was, constantly there was times where people would say, man, how do you have such a good attitude? That's great. And I would be able to share my faith in Jesus. People would ask questions wherever you went, just bystanders would, because they see what's happened. They see the injuries are out there for everybody to see, and they can ask questions or help or whatever. And there's constant opportunities to share my faith. And one of the things I did, kind of when this happened, was say, man, I told God, I said, look, if this here, it is what it is, right? I'm here, but if I get a chance to share my faith as a result of this, I'm going to do it. Right? I kind of made a commitment to myself and a commitment to God to do that, and that's actually helped me to, I guess you could say, come out of my shell and be more bold as a Christian in order to do that because of this circumstance, right? So, how many times does it say in the Bible? And was it Romans 8:28? All things work together for the glory of God. For those who believe. Well, I'm a believer in Jesus, and this is not a good thing that happened to me, but God can make it a good thing in the big scheme of things, right? So, God, it was a very painful process. It was a very not fun process, right? Most everybody would agree that was a very bad thing, but God can make purpose from your pain, right? My pain can give others power. I've been wounded physically, deeply, but God was able to use me and is using me greatly, and it was as a result of that, right? That's what's so awesome. So we were there, and during this process, I also, this happened on September 13th. Well, it was in December, whenever I got to get out of the wheelchair, I learned to walk again, right? That following January is when they went in and I had another surgery. What did they do that time? That was the first surgery, I think it was in January. They went in, my left arm that was all jacked up, and the one that they said was kind of putting together like putting together pieces of gravel that wasn't operating right. In other words, my range of motion was really, really small. And they went in there and they was able to pull some stuff out and move some stuff around and adjust some screws and some plates that were in there. And they went in there and they got me some more motion. Of course, I had to do some more recovery after that, right? More physical therapy, more everything after that. And then a month later, in February of that next year, they went in and they removed the screw and pins in my wrist, right? And then it was about a year later after that, so I'd be back at work at this time. I had to go back under another surgery, and because the rod that they grabbed out of the junk drawer because it was an emergency wasn't quite the right tool for the job, but it's what they had to make do at the time, right? I didn't have a custom job done on my left femur there. It was more of a, here's a spare part, throw it in there, hopefully this works. So I went in there. They replaced the rod there with a different rod, because the first time that first rod I had what's called a non-union, so my bone did not heal correctly. There was still a hairline fracture essentially, and so all my weight every time I took a step was on that rod, and that was picture a coat hanger bending slightly every time you take a step, and eventually you'd get metal fatigue and it would break, and you'd have two knees instead of one in that leg. So I didn't want that to happen. The doctor didn't want that to happen. So they replaced the rod, hoping that it would stimulate the bone growth to happen, and it did, and it worked out great. But every time I went into a doctor's office, they would always look and say, look how well he's doing on this. Look how well this elbow is moving now. Look how well he's doing on this and that and this and that. They would use me as an example, and it was always more opportunities for me to speak and give more of my testimony about my faith in Jesus to each new doctor, each new resident, each new nurse that would come in and see that, right? I'd say, yeah, by the grace of God, man, my faith in Jesus is the way I'm getting through it. I mean, every single time there's more and more people that I got to influence positively because of this awful thing that happened, right? It was an awful thing that happened, but I was able to be used greatly because of it. And so, I mean, it's an incredible thing. And so I think total, so that was my left femur there that they replaced there. And then I had to go back again and get, I went in there because my elbow started messing up. This has been a couple years later. All right, my elbow started kind of messing up again, and they went in there and they found a bone infection in there. They moved some screws, moved some plates, and they found a bone infection in there that was very serious, where it took like 6 weeks of IV antibiotics. Every 8 hours, I was injecting myself through this PICC line with antibiotics, and had to go do that for 6 weeks, and then got cleared up of that. And then I've had some other surgeries. I think, so last time I counted these up, in total, the number of surgeries that I've had as a result of this, I think was 13 surgeries in total. A lot of them minor, some of them major. Of course, the joke is that the only minor surgery is what happens on somebody else, right? Everything that happens to you is a major surgery, right? Whether they call it minor or not. But anyway, so I'm going to have to go into a part 2 on this. But so that's where I was at, and that's kind of through the surgeries and everything. And man, it was talking through it right now. It was such a tough time, but such a formative time, as far as I could do nothing but rely on God. I relied on God so much. It's not even funny how much I relied on God. And in part 2, I want to go in. I got some notes here. In part 2, I want to go in and kind of talk a little bit about the impact on me spiritually, physically, emotionally, everything since then, and kind of some takeaways from this whole thing. And I want this. I'm not just talking about this just to say, oh, look what happened to me. I want this to encourage you, because the thing is, trials will come. Trials will come. That was not the only trial in my life, believe me. And you can go back and see some of the other testimonies and listen to some of the other testimonies in my life on this subject. But so anyway, my goal here is to encourage you to, man, if you're not a Christian, do it, right? It's as simple as ABC. Admit you're a sinner, believe what Jesus did, confess your sins, and confess Him as your Lord and Savior. It's simple. Do that right now, and I can call you your brother or sister in Christ right now. You can come join the family. Now, that don't mean it's going to be easy life. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy life. But it's a life full of joy. It's a life full of joy. No matter what happens, it's a life full of joy. So be sure and stick around next time for part 2, and we'll get into more of the application and everything for that. It's man, just going through this is crazy. So we'll see you in part 2.